Hey, Tony D with another hot take. This one's again about the Bernie Bros, and the Bernie Bros they just won't stop. They're too extreme, in my view. That they have we've had Bernie Bros do things, and the defense of a lot of the Bernie supporters is, well, how many people have the right wing lunatics killed? And they paint that with a very broad brush, as if, when they say right wing crazies, they're including anybody who's basically not a left wing communist who's committed a crime, racist or otherwise. And admittedly, yes, a lot of those guys are right wing and they're crazy. But the thing of it is, two wrongs don't make a right. It doesn't excuse what the more extreme elements of the Bernie Bros are turning into. It doesn't excuse Antifa's political violence. It doesn't excuse, the rhetoric, which is very violent. I mean, I think part of it is the tolerance of Twitter and a lot of these social media platforms, especially Twitter, somewhat Facebook, but not so much anymore. Of the, they have this terms of service where you're not supposed to threaten people, you're not supposed to use violent language, which, that comports to law. Like, it's illegal to threaten people. You can't threaten people. You can't, there are limits. You can't shout fire in a crowded movie house. Now, personally, as an advocate of free speech, I would say, you have to suffer the consequences of that. There really shouldn't be these laws, but you know, Twitter is a private company. They can do what they want, but I think they need to be honest. And the problem I see with Twitter and a lot of these social media platforms, they're not very honest. They're gaming the system behind the scenes for people on the left in this what they see as an altruistic reason. Oh, well, we have to defeat Donald Trump, therefore every leftist has to be, forgiven for their excesses so we could beat Donald Trump. But this is actually hurting their cause. The Bernie Bros who have crossed the line have actually hurt the cause of Bernie. Um, so you have these Project Veritas guys who were caught on camera, proclaiming their communist uh, leanings. First off, communists have no business being in the Democratic Socialist of America. That would be like the Republicans accepting, extreme right wing nutbags in their party who are racist. And in the past, they had tolerated some of that, but they don't really tolerate that much anymore. Um, and there's always going to be a few. And granted, yes, it's one thing to have, voters say that. But when you have people actually working in the campaign, the reason that's worse is because those campaign people have influence over other campaign people. They have organizers, and they could just as easily use those contacts to organize violence as they could to organize, Bernie's, votes. So, you had the one guy who said, well, if Bernie doesn't get the nomination, Milwaukee will burn. That to me sounds like a guy who will plan exactly that, you know, and they're going to see the writing on the wall fairly early on. So this guy is obviously going to plan for that eventuality, I think. Now, he could be all talk and maybe he doesn't do anything. But why would Bernie want to be associated with that if that comes to pass? Um, he should distance himself from that because it's going to be inevitable if Bernie gets the nomination that Trump uses that in his commercials. And Bernie will have no defense. I mean, what is he going to do? Then is he going to come out and say, well, I already fired these guys? He didn't fire them. They're still working in his campaign. The latest is a guy who doesn't work in his campaign anymore, but he sounded pretty high up in the 2016 campaign. He was Bernie's advisor on prison reform for the 2016 campaign, which sounds incredibly specific to me, but also sounds kind of like an important job when it comes to being, a left-wing crew of guys that you had a specific guy on prison reform. Ironically, the article didn't state who the current guy was, and I suspect that maybe Bernie doesn't need a current guy on prison reform because Trump passed prison reform. So maybe it's a non-issue for him now. But this guy, apparently, according to the article, they were building a new prison. And he broke into it to hide guns inside the prison walls. So, and it was part of this elaborate escape plan to free the prisoners. That's messed up. I mean, that is quite a level of criminality. This isn't a guy who, stole a little money, or maybe he went a little too far with his, prison protest, whatever you want to call it. That's a guy who's looking to hurt people. That, he was hiding weapons, apparently, in this prison to start a prison riot where people would probably die, or at the very least they'd get injured. That's pretty bad. And you might say, well, he's not in the campaign anymore, so Bernie doesn't have to say anything. Well, I mean, he was in his campaign. That's a pretty radical guy right there. You can't help but go, how many other guys like that are in his campaign right now? I know Trump's going to ask that. I know Trump's going to say that. And Bernie's going to have to defend that. He's going to have to defend his 3 houses, just like he did when Mike Bloomberg brought it out. He's going to have to defend the guy, one of his supporters who voted in the caucus and then marched out of the booth and slapped a 15-year-old kid who supports Trump. The violence, and he's going to have to eventually, distance himself from Antifa, excuse me. And, the truth be told, I don't think Antifa as a group necessarily supports Bernie. For Antifa, Bernie's not left enough. But, if any member of Antifa is going to vote, they're going to vote for Bernie. I mean, that's, I don't know if there's anybody to the left of Bernie even running out in a third party. Probably. Maybe you get Democratic Socialists of America put up a candidate, but that would just draw votes away from Bernie, so I doubt it. Maybe Green Party, but I don't even know if they're going to run a candidate this time around. It may be too early for them, just like it's too early for the Libertarian Party. Another reason to join the Libertarians, everyone. You won't have to hear all this BS for a year leading up to the election. So Bernie has in my view, when Pete Buttigieg brought it up at the debate, he made a salient point to Bernie that why does his particular campaign draw all these crazies? Now, they drew a lot of crazies. I wouldn't say a lot, but they drew crazies in every campaign. Even Hillary Clinton, I'm sure, had a couple of nutbags. Trump had a few of them. But Bernie's are politically motivated. They are, and we hear them on the tapes saying that, this is, Bernie wants gulags. This is his eventual plan, which I don't believe. Bernie is way more mainstream than these guys think he is, but, that they're saying that shows you that, as Jordan Peterson says, like, if there wasn't a Stalin, there's going to be one, even if you institute that wonderful communist utopia that you managed to build. There's going to be a Stalin in your ranks that will just wait to take you out and take your place. So a lot of these guys sound like Stalin. They sound like they're willing to do anything. They talked about re-education camps for Trump supporters. I mean, that is a radical notion. These guys really think that people on the other side of the political divide should be rounded up and put in camps. This is extreme. If this was reversed, if you had Trump supporters talking about putting anybody in camps, not even the racist tropes that might come up, but just straight up, I think we should put Democrats into camps. You would never, ever hear the end of it on TV news. We all know that. So Bernie needs to distance himself from some of these supporters. He definitely needed to fire these guys working in his campaign, even though that would hurt him. The fact that he didn't, it's going to hurt him a lot worse if he's the nominee. I don't think the DNC will allow him to be the nominee. I think it all ends after the superdelegates. Superdelegates are going to get in and they're going to change everything. They're going to vote for other people. Bernie's going to be out, and I think it's likely Milwaukee will see riots. I don't know if it's going to burn. I think it's a bit of a bold statement. I think there's definitely going to be a riot. It will probably be Antifa's, last big hurrah. Hopefully, it'll be big enough that people finally go, oh no, we're not putting up with this. And then you're going to see Antifa put on the terrorist watch list, or whatever, the terrorist list, whatever it is, just like they did in New Jersey, by the way. And they're going to make it very hard for these college students to be in Antifa. They're going to have to be forced. They'll basically force them to change their name to something else, which is what they'll do. They'll say, okay, now you can't use Antifa anymore. We're going to call ourselves whatever. They'll do the same things, but they'll be forced to disperse more, and that will cause Antifa to split into splintery groups that will be even less cohesive than they already are, because they're pretty not cohesive already, which is why it's probably taken them. The only reason it's going to coalesce in Milwaukee is because they kind of know they're going to be screwed. I think they kind of know what's coming, so they're going, like this guy said, Milwaukee's going to burn. I think they're prepping for it. I think they want to, make a big show of it. But again, it all goes against Bernie. It goes against his policies. All this stuff will smear progressivism for decades. And it won't be like the hippies. The hippies got romanticized. And the hippies were pacifists. So people like hippies. They do. I mean, hippies are lazy and they're annoying sometimes. They're kind of dirty, but they're kind of fun too. Hey man, you want some pot? They kind of, they're cool in that way. They don't hurt anybody. Even when they got hit, even when there was a riot at the 68 convention in Chicago, it wasn't like you would say, well, the hippies started it. No, you wouldn't say that at all. You would just see a bunch of long-haired weirdos and kids getting beaten up by the cops, and you felt bad for them. I mean, look at the pictures. You feel bad for the hippies. They just want peace. They want to stop the war. These are good things. You could side with the hippies. You can't do that with Antifa. You look at Antifa and you go, oh no. F those guys. Yeah, go. We need cops. Get the cops over here. They're going to side with the cops. That's going to be the difference. It's not going to be what these leftists think. They've missed the boat on how to do protest. Because once you cross into the realm of political violence, understand that your establishment opponent is already there. That's exactly what they want you to do, dummies.